Rich Tarani with TMC. Thanks for watching. We're at ITEXPO 2014. We're in Las Vegas. James Tagg is here. He's the CTO of Truphone. James, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
Good. So I interviewed you
WebRTC.
at WebRTC Expo, which was in Atlanta. We do a lot of events, so it was in the summer, so I'm going to say it was maybe June, July time frame. It was probably
Late June. Yeah.
It was a few weeks before I went away. I was in the south of France. I tell people the reason I went was to test your network.
Yeah, thanks.
And you're welcome. And you guys were nice enough, when you heard I was going, you sent me an iPhone. It was a brand new iPhone 5S. And you also sent me a MiFi. It was a Huawei MiFi. And I really put them through their paces. I actually was working the whole time. It was a working vacation for me, which is the norm for many of us. Yeah. And it worked great the whole time I was there. And I'm curious, how are you able to allow someone like me to roam throughout Europe on your network so quickly with broadband access? How does it work?
Okay, so we built a new type of network. So what we do, if you've been with a US operator, normally you'll go to Europe and then all your data will home route. So it'll go all the way back to somewhere, somewhere in Dallas or the Midwest.
Just like what happens with a phone call, right? Yeah. So if somebody calls me and I'm in Europe, and they're calling me from the U.S. and I have a U.S. subscription, I actually am paying international. I'm paying international rates, even though my voicemail is here in the States.
That's right. Yeah. So it all goes back, and then if you're consuming a site like Amazon or whatever, they're built from 14 or 15 different web hits. So each one has got to go back, and it's got to render and so on. So you end up with a very sluggish service normally. So what we've done is we've built these data centers around the world, and we route your data to the nearest data center and drop it out into the internet locally. And that means that you can render your sites and do your browsing and so on much more quickly. And what data rates were you getting there?
I didn't do any testing, but what I can tell you is that it was speedy enough to work. I didn't have any complaints. A few times when I first turned on the MiFi, I had trouble getting on the network, but I had some configuration changes which needed to be made. Your call center was amazing. I landed on a Sunday morning. I don't think I could have been more groggy, jet lag, groggy, no sleep on the airplane, and the MiFi wasn't working. And I was in the line to rent a car, simultaneously negotiating, trying to get on the phone, and the phone was working fine, and the MiFi didn't. And then once I got on, they eventually figured out that I had to change two settings. Once I changed the settings, the MiFi really quickly got on. But prior to that, it was a little bogged down. But once I got the settings right, which I later determined were also in the manual, which of course...
Well, but you shouldn't have to read the manual. So
but the manual is only 5 pages.
Okay.
I was kind of embarrassed. It's a 5-page manual. I shouldn't have looked at it. The point is, it worked really well for me. And for normal working, which I was on an iPad, and I was on an iPhone, which was your iPhone, plus my own iPhone, which I use sometimes for music. And I also had a Microsoft Surface Pro 3, which I had just gotten. So those were the devices I was using, and I never had a hiccup.
Yeah, we see, the technology that we put in gives you a big speed up. So before we had it in some countries, we might have been, half a meg, 3/4 of a meg, and you put the technology in and you local route it, and you're in the sort of 6 to 10 meg range. So it works really nicely.
Yeah, really. And the way you do your pricing is kind of interesting. There's group plans where you can have a bucket where a group shares it, or individual plans. So I really like the fact that you can do that as well. The question is, what's the biggest challenge, I wonder, to having virtually all the companies that are traveling to Europe, or having people traveling to Europe, use a service like yours? There's so much money that they can save, and at the same time have better service.
Yeah, it's a really good service. So what we found 4 or 5 months ago, that was quite complicated to explain it to people. So probably when you went, we were still before the 6 country bundle. So you'd be going to France, and we'd say, well, it's very, very cheap in England, but it's sort of okay in France, and it's a little bit more expensive in Germany, but Germany will be coming on board next month, and all this sort of stuff. And at the beginning of the summer, we decided to put pretty much all the countries that you'd ever want to in bundle. So we have 66 countries in bundle now. So the whole of Europe is in bundle, all of North America, Argentina and Brazil, China, Hong Kong, Australia, New Zealand, just big swathes of the world. So now we have a very simple proposition, which is how much do you want to use, and it works in it's in bundle in 66 countries, which is pretty much everywhere you'll go.
Now, it's worth mentioning also that I did some math in one of my columns where if you had, let's say, for example, 100 people going to Europe, and you decided to buy unlocked phones instead of locked phones and use a service like yours, you could save a ton of money. And I think it's interesting that since I wrote that column, that was some months ago, the push in the U.S. has been more towards unlocked devices. We now can unlock our devices after the contract's over. We can buy unlocked devices and have them subsidized by the carrier rather than subsidized kind of in more of a lease instead of a lease to own, as opposed to the old way where things were locked and we were stuck with the carrier. So I think that's a good trend in your favor. And I should tell the viewers out there that whether they work with Truphone or some of the other companies in the space, you guys were obviously a pioneer, that they should consider this kind of like a global roaming provider, because they can save so much money and also, in some cases, have a much faster connection for their team overseas.
Yeah, I mean, what we're trying to offer is not necessarily just saving money, well, that's really a good thing, but it's the fact that you can work when you travel abroad as if you're at home, right? So the sort of data rates that you're doing, sort of call quality you're used to, you just travel all over Europe, and you'll get the same sort of data rates, and the voice quality will be crystal clear, and you can just work normally, and you can just treat it, it's all in bundle, right? The whole of Europe's in bundle. So you can just treat it as if you were going to Texas for the day. It's no different going, I don't know whether you might live in Texas, but it's no different to going somewhere else in America than you're normal. You're just going somewhere else in the world. It happens to be Europe.
It's really how it should be.
Yeah, and it absolutely is how it should be.
I know. I mean, if you think about it, it's how it has to be eventually, and so you're really the company that's helping get us to the future of telecommunications.
Yeah, that's our kind of grand plan. It's the future, sort of the future now, the future of telecoms behavior.
And everything's moving to the cloud, and there's such a push, especially in the U.S., to move everything to the cloud. And the issue becomes, you get to Europe, what the heck do you do?
Oh no! I mean, if you haven't got all of your data on your laptop, I mean, the old mode, you'd leave the office and you'd download half a gig of data, which would be all of the PDFs of all your company's products and everything, and you'd go off to Europe and you'd be out of touch with the office for a couple of weeks, and you'd do all your sales calls, and then you get home and you spent a week typing it all into a machine, right? And now it's all in the cloud, it's all in real time, and so on. But if you then travel to Europe and you have to turn your cell phone off, you're back to the old-fashioned world. The problem is the old-fashioned world doesn't exist anymore. You can't say, I'm going to Europe, can I download all the PDFs? People look at you and go, well, just get Wi-Fi in your hotel room. So now you're doing a day's work talking to your customers or prospective customers, and then a whole other half day at the hotel typing it all in on the cloud. So the benefit of having it with the cellular and the MiFi unit that you used is, as you're working during the day, you're doing the work, you get to the end of the day, you can go out and have a beer. So what we've given you is your social life back.
So first I was making the argument for the CFO. You're making the argument for the end user.
Yes.
That you get to have a beer. So
exactly.
It's good. So now we got both sides covered. Just got to hope the CFO stops watching this video until the end part.
Don't remember the.
And I should mention, the few times I've been to Europe recently for conferences, without a doubt, the hotel Wi-Fi at least one day wasn't working. So I was forced to rely on my. I try to use Wi-Fi whenever possible, just to minimize the strain on the network. Yeah. And I had to rely on a backup. So thankfully, and if someone has important work to do, a presentation, and they have something in the morning, they have no internet access. It doesn't really help, especially when you're dealing with jet lag, and you only have limited amount of time where you can do the work because you need to try to catch up on sleep.
Yeah, I mean, you just need to do the work when you're most efficient in your working day, whatever that happens to be with the jet lag, and you don't want to be trying to put in a day and a half of work to cope with the fact that you're not connected properly. You should be connected properly, and if you want to do a day and a half of work and make the CFO really happy, it's actually a day and a half of work. It's 50% more productive as opposed to just trying to catch up with the deficiencies of technology.
So are there any other things coming down the pike that we should know about?
Well, yeah, obviously, because you saw me at WebRTC, we're doing a lot of playing with WebRTC at the moment. So we're very much hoping that we can kind of get that integrated into the experience. Things like, so, You go, you know, you go away, you forget your charger, your phone is now dead. Maybe you can get your phone calls on your PC with your WebRTC client. It's, you know, you can get to your contacts, things like that. So things that make it, you know, easier to work when you're traveling, really.
Very cool.
So,
I can't wait to see how that would
yeah.
work. Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks for being on the program again. Great
Yeah.
to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you again.